a man stands alone in the dark. Not metaphorically dark, not going through a hard season dark, actually dark, the kind of dark that existed before electricity, before gas lamps, before even the Bronze Age oil fires that flickered in the tents of ancient Canaan. The kind of dark where you cannot see your own hands. His name is Abram. He is somewhere between 75 and 85 years old, depending on how you read the genealogy, and he has spent his entire adult life following a God who gave him a promise, and then, for decade after decade, appeared to do absolutely nothing about it. The promise was simple. Abram would have a son. His descendants would be as countless as the stars. He would become the father of a great nation. He is still waiting. His wife Sarai is past the age of childbearing. His tent, which should be full of the noise of grandchildren by now, is silent. And somewhere in the deep Canaanite night, after a battle that Abram has just barely survived by the skin of his teeth, he is afraid. This is where Genesis 15 opens, and this is where something remarkable happens. Do not be afraid, Abram, I am your shield. 4 words in the Hebrew, Al-Tira, Anoki Majan Lach, do not fear, I am your shield. You might have heard that do not be afraid is in the Bible 365 times, one for every day of the year. It is a beautiful thought. It circulates across Christian social media every week, and if you have ever gone looking for the source, you have noticed something odd. Nobody can find the list, because the list does not exist. The actual number of times the phrase appears in any major English translation is somewhere between 70 and 100, not 365. But here is what nobody tells you. The real count, the full, unfiltered, every language count of every time the God of the universe leaned down to a terrified human being and said, in some form, "Stop, I am here. Do not be afraid." That number is far more interesting than 365. And we are going to find it together. But first, we have to understand something about fear itself. Because the Bible in the original Hebrew does not treat fear as one thing, it treats it as two. The first kind of fear is the Hebrew word yara. The verb form is yer. Say it with me, yare. And here is the thing about yer, it does not just mean panic. It does not just mean shaking knees and a pounding heart. Yer carries within it the idea of reverence, of awe so deep it shakes your whole body. When the Bible says, fear the Lord, that is yer. When Moses stood at the burning bush and hid his face because he was afraid to look at God, that is yer. It is fear that bows. Fear that recognizes it is standing before something vast and holy, and completely beyond its own comprehension. The second kind is pached, sudden dread, startling, animal, run for your life terror. This is the word used for what happened to Pharaoh's army when the Red Sea came crashing down on their chariots. Pached, the kind of fear that takes your legs out from under you. When God says, Al-Tira, do not fear, He is not telling us to stop having feelings. He is not instructing us to manufacture false courage or pretend that danger is not real. He is targeting something deeper. He is addressing the yer, the collapse of the soul in the face of something it cannot control. And the remarkable thing about this command, the thing that will take you 25 minutes to fully feel, is this. God never says it to people who are fine. Stay with me, because we are going back to Abram. And what happens next in that dark field in Canaan is the key to everything. Abram is standing in that dark field, and God has just said 4 words to him. Do not be afraid. Now you might expect what comes next to be comfort, a gentle reassurance, a divine pat on the shoulder, but that is not what happens. What happens is that God makes Abram look up. Look toward heaven, God says, and count the stars if you are able to count them. Think about what that means. Abram is afraid. His body is flooded with yer, that deep bone-level dread, and instead of telling him to close his eyes, God points him at something so vast and so incomprehensible that his fear has no choice but to shrink in comparison. This is not therapy. This is not a coping strategy. This is God redirecting the object of Abraham's awe. You are afraid of your circumstances. Look at the stars. Now tell me, which one are you afraid of? So shall your descendants be, God says. And this is the verse that changed the entire trajectory of human history, Abraham believed. Not because the circumstances changed. Not because Sarai suddenly became young again. Not because a son appeared in the tent door. Simply because he looked up at the stars and something shifted inside him. The Hebrew is stunning here. Ve'amen ba'adnai, he trusted. He leaned his full weight into the Lord. And God counted that trust as righteousness. This is the first, do not be afraid in the Bible. And it does something that every single one of them will do from Genesis to Revelation, across 1,000 years of human voices crying out to a God who keeps showing up in the dark. It does not remove the danger, it redirects the gaze. Here's what most people miss. 14 chapters later, Abram, now renamed Abraham, has a son. His name is Ishmael, but Ishmael is not the son of promise. Ishmael is the son of a plan that Abraham and Sarai made when they got tired of waiting, and Ishmael's mother is a woman named Hagar. Hagar is Egyptian. She is a servant. In the social calculus of the ancient Near East, she is at the very bottom of every hierarchy that matters: foreign, female, enslaved. She has no tribe. She has no land. She has no priest to intercede for her and no temple to run to. When Sarah turns on her and drives her out into the wilderness with her teenage son Ishmael, she has nothing. She finds a water source in the desert and she runs out of water. And she does the most heartbreaking thing in the book of Genesis. She puts her son down under a bush, walks about a bowshot away and sits with her back turned to him, because she cannot watch him die. And she weeps. Here is what I need you to feel in that moment. Hagar is not a patriarch. She is not in the covenant lineage. She is not one of the heroes of the faith. By every human measure, she should not be the kind of person who receives a direct word from the God of Abraham. And then God opens her eyes. Not Abraham's eyes, Hagar's eyes, and she sees a well of water she could not see before. But before the well, before the physical rescue, the angel of God calls to her from heaven and says, "What is wrong, Hagar? Do not be afraid." Altira Hagar. The God who said it to the father of nations says it to the woman nobody counted. The God who pointed Abraham at the stars points Hagar at water in the desert, and she says something no one else in the Bible says. She gives God a name, El Roi, the God who sees me. Not the God who sees Abraham, not the God who sees the chosen nation, the God who sees me. This is the pattern beginning to reveal itself, and it will keep going deeper and stranger until the moment it climaxes in a scene you may never read the same way again. But first, we have to go to Egypt, and then to a shoreline, and then to the moment that 600 iron chariots come screaming out of the desert toward a terrified crowd of people with nowhere left to run. You have to understand what Egypt was. Not the Egypt of Sunday school flannel boards, not the Egypt of animated movies with singing pharaohs and comic relief camels. The real Egypt, the Egypt of 1250 BC, give or take, was the most powerful military empire on the surface of the earth. Its army moved on iron-rimmed chariot wheels. Its pharaoh was considered a living god. Its borders stretched from the Nile Delta down into Nubia, and when it wanted something, it took it. What it wanted for 400 years was labor. The historian Josephus, a first-century Jewish scholar who wrote extensively about this period, describes the Israelite labor conditions in Egypt as systematic destruction of a people. Not just hard work, designed humiliation, the deliberate engineering of a population that would be too exhausted, too broken, and too terrified to ever imagine freedom. And it worked. For 400 years it worked. So when Moses leads somewhere between 1 and 2 million people, men, women, children, livestock, elderly, nursing mothers, out of Egypt and into the Sinai wilderness, you need to picture what that crowd looks like. These are not soldiers. These are not adventurers. These are people who have never in their entire lives made a decision about where to go or when to sleep or what to eat. They are 4 centuries deep in learned helplessness. And they are walking into a desert they do not know, led by a man who spent 40 years as a shepherd, following a column of fire. And then they reach the water. The Red Sea, or in the Hebrew Yam Suf, the Sea of Reeds, stretches out in front of them, impassable, and behind them the sound begins, low at first, then louder. Chariot wheels. Pharaoh has changed his mind. He has sent 600 of his best chariot commanders, not foot soldiers, chariots, the ancient equivalent of tanks, and they are closing fast. And the crowd begins to do what crowds have always done when they are trapped. They turn on their leader. Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? They are not being dramatic. They genuinely believe they are about to be cut down on the shoreline and their bodies left in the sand. Their fear is completely rational. Their fear is, by every observable metric, correct. And this is where Moses says something that has no business being said by a man standing between a sea and 600 chariots. Do not be afraid. Altira. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Now here is the part nobody tells you. Moses does not know what is about to happen. He is not standing there with a weather forecast for miraculous sea partings. He does not have a plan. He has a staff and a promise and a God who has, so far, done things Moses did not expect every single time. What Moses has learned from the burning bush, from the plagues, from the Passover night is this: the God who called him does not need the circumstances to cooperate. So he says, do not be afraid, not because he has a solution. He says it because he has redirected his gaze. Just like Abraham with the stars. Just like Hagar with the well. The solution, when it comes, is violent and strange and so complete that Exodus 14 tells us the Israelites saw the Egyptians dead on the shore, and they feared the Lord. They feared God. Because when they watched the sea swallow the most powerful army on earth, their fear did not disappear. It simply found its correct object. Here is what that moment cost, though. What it cost the people standing on that shore. What it cost Moses. The Israelite historian and philosopher Philo of Alexandria, writing in the 1st century, described the crossing of the Red Sea as the moment Israel became, for the first time, a people capable of trusting. Not because they had always trusted, but because they had been terrified and God had shown up anyway. Trust is not built in the absence of fear. Trust is built in the middle of it. And here is the CTA I want to plant with you right now, because we are about to go somewhere harder. If you are watching this in a moment when the chariots are behind you and the water is in front of you, I want you to stay with this video, because we are not done. And the man we are going to meet next is hiding in a wine press, and he is so afraid that he is thrashing wheat underground so nobody sees him. And what God says to him is the strangest version of this phrase in the entire Bible. The year is somewhere around 1150 BC. Israel has been in the Promised Land for about 100 years, and in that 100 years, they have managed to do something that their enemies never could have engineered from the outside. They have dismantled themselves from within. They have forgotten the God who parted the sea. They have intermarried with the surrounding nations, adopted their gods, built their altars on the high places, and settled into a comfortable spiritual amnesia that has left them, generation by generation, weaker and more exposed. And now the Midianites have come. The Midianites are not a conventional invading army. They do not conquer cities and plant flags. They are something worse. They are raiders. Every harvest season, just as the crops ripen, just as the grain is ready to be cut, the Midianites come swarming across the Jordan like locusts. The book of Judges says they came with their livestock and their tents in numbers like sand on the seashore. They stripped the land clean, ate everything, left nothing. and then disappeared back across the river, leaving behind a population that was slowly starving to death and too demoralized to fight back. This went on for 7 years. 7 years of watching your harvest disappear. 7 years of hiding your family in caves in the mountains. 7 years of a fear so constant, so grinding, so woven into the fabric of daily life that it stopped feeling like fear and started feeling like weather. Just the way things are. And into this world, we meet a man named Gideon. Gideon is thrashing wheat. This is not remarkable on its face. Thrashing wheat is how you separate grain from chaff, how you feed your family through the winter. What is remarkable is where he is doing it. He is not on the thrashing floor. The thrashing floor is elevated, open, exposed to the wind, which is exactly where you need to be to thresh wheat efficiently. But the thrashing floor is also visible for miles, and visible means the Midianites will come. So Gideon is thrashing wheat at the bottom of a wine press, underground, hidden, working in secret to save enough grain that his family will not starve while an entire nation cowers around him. This is where the angel of the Lord appears. And the angel says something so jarring, so tonally mismatched with everything about this scene, that you almost have to laugh. "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Gideon does not take the compliment. He pushes back immediately, which, honestly, is one of the most human things anyone does in the entire Old Testament. He says, "If the Lord is with us, why has all this happened? Where are all the wonders our ancestors told us about? The Lord has abandoned us." Pay attention to this. God does not answer the theological question. He does not explain the 7 years of silence. He does not offer a retrospective account of what went wrong and why. He simply turns to Gideon and says, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" And Gideon objects again. "My clan is the weakest in Manasseh. I am the least in my father's house. You have the wrong man." This is the moment. Because this is what "do not be afraid" sounds like when it is addressed to a man who has never done anything brave in his life. It does not sound like "you are courageous." It does not sound like "you have what it takes." It sounds like this: "I will be with you." Not "you are strong enough." Not "you are the right man for the job." Not "look at your qualifications and feel confident." "I will be with you." The Hebrew construction here is Anoki Aye a match, "I myself will be with you." The same root as the name God gave Moses at the burning bush. Aye Asher Aye. I am who I am. I will be what I will be. The God who exists in pure present tense, no past, no future, just an eternal, uncollapsible now, says to the man hiding in the wine press, "I am here with you in this exact moment." And what God does next with Gideon is almost funny. He does not give Gideon a great army. He gives him 300 men. 300 men against a Midianite horde described as innumerable. And he arms them not with swords but with torches, and clay pots, and trumpets. He wins anyway. Not because Gideon becomes brave, but because Gideon stops looking at the size of his enemy and starts looking at the size of his God. This is not self-help. This is not believe in yourself. The Bible is doing something more radical than that. It is systematically, story by story, century by century, dismantling the idea that courage is a personality trait. Courage is not something you find inside yourself. Courage, in the language of the Hebrew scriptures, is something that comes from redirecting your yer, your awe, your deepest reverence. If you are afraid of the Midianites, you will hide in a wine press. If you are in awe of the God who made the Midianites, you will walk out into the dark with a torch and a clay pot and trust that the darkness is his to command. This is what Isaiah understood. Writing about 600 years after Gideon, from a city under threat of Babylonian siege, to a people so exhausted and so afraid that they had stopped being able to imagine deliverance. Isaiah delivers what may be the most concentrated, most direct, most personally addressed version of this phrase in the entire Bible. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Isaiah 41:10. 5 sentences. 5 separate promises stacked on top of each other like a wall being built against the wind. This is not the language of a general briefing his troops. This is the language of someone who knows exactly how tired you are. This is the language of a God who has been saying the same 2 words since a dark field in Canaan, Altira, 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 and has never once grown impatient with the fact that his people keep needing to hear it again. Because here is what the pattern reveals, across 4 stories and 600 years of history. God does not say, "Do not be afraid," once and consider the matter settled. He says it again, and again, and again, to different people in different deserts, facing different impossibilities, in different languages, in different centuries, the same 2 words, spoken fresh into each new terror as if he is saying it for the very first time. Which means the question is not, how many times did God say it? The question is, who did he say it to next? And the answer to that is going to take us to a teenage girl in a hill town in Galilee. And what happens in that room, what the angel's very first words are, and why they have to be those words, will change the way you read every Christmas story you have ever heard. Nazareth is not impressive. In the 1st century, it is a small agricultural village in the hills of Lower Galilee, perhaps 200 people, perhaps 300, built on a limestone ridge above a valley floor where the wheat grows in spring and the wildflowers come up through the rock. It has no synagogue mentioned in any historical record before Jesus. It has no significance in the Hebrew scriptures. The prophet Nathanael, when he hears where Jesus is from, says what every educated Jew of the period apparently thought about Nazareth. Can anything good come from there? The Roman writer Pliny the Elder, cataloging the towns of Galilee in his natural history, does not mention Nazareth at all. It is that small, that unremarkable, that invisible. This is where God sends the angel. Not to Rome, not to Jerusalem, not to the temple courts where the priests are burning incense and the scholars are debating the finer points of Torah. To a village so small it does not make the Roman maps. To a girl, and she is a girl, the Greek word parthenos implies youth, likely between 12 and 16 by the customs of the time, who is engaged to a carpenter, and has, as far as we know, no particular distinction beyond her willingness to say yes. The angel's name is Gabriel, and the first thing Gabriel says before the announcement, before the impossible news, before the word that will shatter and remake her entire life, is this: "Do not be afraid, Mary." Mi phabu in the Greek, do not be frightened, do not be alarmed. Stop for a moment and feel the weight of that. Gabriel is an angel, a being so vast and so blazing with the presence of God that every single time an angel appears in Scripture, the first human response is to fall on the ground in terror. Not reverence, terror. The prophet Daniel, when Gabriel appears to him, falls into a deep sleep on his face. Zechariah, the elderly priest, is struck mute with fear when Gabriel appears in the temple. The shepherds in the fields outside Bethlehem, when the angel of the Lord appears to them, are told explicitly that they were terrified. And the very first thing Gabriel says in every single one of these appearances, "Do not be afraid," which tells you something extraordinary about the nature of the divine encounter. It tells you that the fear is real, that the overwhelm is real, that the appropriate human response to standing in the presence of something holy is, in fact, a kind of dissolution, a falling apart of everything you thought was solid about yourself. And then into that dissolution, before the message, before the mission, before the task that will cost you everything. The voice says, "Do not be afraid." Mary absorbs the announcement. The Holy Spirit will come upon her. The Most High will overshadow her. She will conceive and bear a son, and his name will be called Jesus, Yeshua, which in the Hebrew means, God saves. She does not run, she does not argue, she does not demand a sign, not yet, not here. She asks one question: how? How can this be, since I have not known a man? She is not asking out of doubt. She is asking out of a desire to understand the mechanism so she can say yes with full knowledge of what she is agreeing to. And when Gabriel explains, she says the most staggering thing a human being says in the New Testament: I am the Lord's servant, may it be to me as you have said. I do he dual Kyrio, behold the servant of the Lord. She is a teenage girl in an insignificant village, and she is about to carry God in her body. She is about to become the most scrutinized woman in her community, because everyone will be able to count backward from the birth to the conception, and the math will not favor her reputation. She is about to watch her engagement dissolve, or nearly dissolve. She is about to flee to Egypt as a refugee. She is about to stand at the foot of a cross. She knows none of this yet. But she says yes. And she says yes because the first thing the angel said was, do not be afraid. Not here is the plan and here is how it works out. Not here is the 10-year roadmap for how this resolves. Not here is the full cost so you can decide if it is worth it. Do not be afraid, I am here. God sees you, and then will you say yes? Now, this is the CTA I want to give you right now, while you are still inside this story. If you have been watching this, and you are in a moment where God is asking something of you that you do not understand, something that does not make sense from the outside, something that will cost you your comfort or your reputation or your carefully managed plan for your own life, I want you to notice what he always says first. Not here is the outcome. Not here is the guarantee. Not here is why it will all be fine in the end. He says, do not be afraid. And then he asks you for your yes. Stay with me, because we are almost at the end of the pattern now, and the last two scenes are the ones that will close everything. The disciples are on a lake. It is somewhere between 3 and 6 in the morning, the fourth watch of the night, which in Roman military time means the hours just before dawn, the coldest and darkest stretch, when the body is most depleted and the mind is most susceptible to terror. Jesus has just fed 5,000 people on a hillside with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. He has sent the crowds home and the disciples to the boat, and he has gone up the mountain alone to pray. And then the wind comes. Matthew 14 tells us the boat is being battered by the waves and the wind is against them. They are experienced fishermen, Peter, James, John. These are men who grew up on this lake, who know its moods, who have read its weather since childhood. Which means when they are afraid, the fear is not ignorance. It is expertise. They know exactly how bad this is. And then they see something moving toward them on the water. Not a boat, not a swimmer, something walking on the surface of the lake in the middle of a windstorm at 3 in the morning, moving toward them through the spray and the dark. And they scream. The Greek word Matthew uses is eterachthesin. They were deeply disturbed, shaken to the core, seized by a fear that the text describes as something like madness. They think it is a ghost. And out of the wind and the dark and the spray, a voice comes. Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid. Tharsate ego ime, me phobist. Be courageous, I am, do not be afraid. Did you catch the middle phrase? Ego ime, I am. It is the same phrase Jesus uses in John 8:58 when he says, before Abraham was, I am. The divine name, the Aye Asher Aye of the burning bush, spoken in Greek in the middle of a storm on a Galilean lake at 3 in the morning. He is not just saying, it is me, calm down. He is saying, the I am who was with Abram in the dark field, the I am who saw Hagar in the wilderness, the I am who stood with Moses at the shore, the I am who promised Gideon, I will be with you. That same I am is here, stepping out of the storm, coming toward you. Peter, God bless him, does the most Peter thing possible. He says, Lord, if it is you, tell me to come to you on the water. and Jesus says one word. Come. Peter gets out of the boat, and for a moment, one extraordinary, absurd, defiant against physics moment, he walks on water, until he notices the wind, until the fear of the storm becomes louder than the voice that said come, and he begins to sink. And Jesus catches him, immediately, before he goes under, before he drowns, before his failure becomes final. He catches him, and he says, and this is the only gentle rebuke in the entire scene, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" Not "you are a coward," not "you failed the test," not "you should have known better." Why did you doubt? As if the only real question, the only question that matters across every story we have told tonight, from Abraham to Mary to the fishermen on the lake, is simply this: what were you looking at? What had your gaze? Because the pattern is complete now, or almost complete. There is one more scene, one more person, one more time the voice speaks those two words into the dark. And this time, it speaks them to the man who heard Jesus say them more than almost anyone alive. The man who was in the boat that night. The man who walked on water for 30 seconds before he looked at the wind. The man who is now 90 years old in exile, on a prison island in the Aegean Sea, having outlived every other member of the 12. His name is John. And what he is about to see will make everything we have discussed tonight feel like a prelude.